Me.
Okay. So, this on me for a second. Okay. Yesterday we were reading Hatchet, and the pilot had a massive heart attack and is probably dead. Right? So, we talked about and we predicted some things that might happen. Brian had some choices. He could either go ahead and try and land the plane while he still had fuel or wait for it to run out of gas. He waited for it to run out of gas, and right where we left off, the plane was about to go down.
He puked.
And
he
threw up because he's got nerves about what he knows is about to happen. There's nothing he can do to stop it. You guys were making some other predictions. It had mentioned, we know that he has a hatchet. We know he's probably not going to die because the story would probably just be over then. Whatever happens, Brian's going to survive in some way. We know he has a hatchet. It also mentioned there's a survival kit in the plane, and you guys kind of talked about yesterday that that's going to be super important for him to have. So today, you guys are going to build, before we read, you guys are going to build your own survival kit. You will get a list of some different equipment. There's a dollar amount on each of these things. You have, hang on, I think it says on here, $300. That seems like a lot, but survival equipment is expensive, and you don't know how long you're going to be stranded for. Oh, dear goodness. Right. So, you have to decide what items that you want on here. Think about what might be practical. So I just heard somebody say a phone. Is there any reception out here where? No. I'm not sure a phone would be very beneficial, and not a cell phone, because there's probably not cell phone towers out in the Canadian wilderness.
You use it for time, maybe.
Okay. Now, it also says you can only buy 8 items. You have a maximum of $300 and 8 items.
What do you do with the rest of the money? Keep it and spend it?
You just have the extra money if you don't spend all your money. It doesn't help you in the wilderness. Okay? Now, after you make your list, I want you to also tell me, there are some questions. Are you guys paying attention? There are some questions that go with it. And it says, were there any items that you wish were on the list, but they weren't there? Is there anything that you were wanting and it wasn't a choice? Dick's Sporting Goods is all out of it. Too bad, so sad. Which items, why did you choose the items? And of the items you chose, which one do you think is the most important? And which one do you think is the least important? Okay? So, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, like 10 minutes to work on this. No, you're not cutting them out. You're just going to look through the list and decide. Here's the deal. In class, kids, virtual friends, if you want to work together on this, you can. I'm going to have the kids in here work with partners.
Miss Knapp and I work on my own.
Yeah, you can work on your own if you want.
I'm excited.
All right, Sophie. Sean, do you want a partner?
Yeah.
Sophie.
Am I working with this?
You can move over and sit with Sophie.
I'm working with this.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
All right, you each get your own
A knife. Yeah, we need a knife. All
right, discuss what is going to be the best for you to have.
Miss Bab,
Yeah.
I ended up with 310.
Nope. Nope. Try again.
That sharpener is good for you. We need a machete either. Yeah, that sounds good. I know you don't need bugs for it to be a big hand, just smack it whole one. We're dead. I mean, what if you're allergic?
Okay, so
No, he needs food now. He needs hot. He needs dinner. He needs this dinner.
did somebody just say they're making s'mores? Is that really the most important?
Yeah, it's not.
This is your survival kit.
Then I'm gonna get the. I mean, 6 minutes. You don't need cubes. Yeah. Oh, that's. I think that's true. Yeah, we just need like a 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Oh, one set of cans. I know one thing that we need that is no, it's 300. Dude, he doesn't need that much. That's just I don't need a Remy sleeping bag. Just do the cheapest one, the regular. Yeah, just Henry, you can only spend 8 things. You can only get 8 things. Yeah. And campfire. Only have 100. I can only do one more thing. Wait, how much things did I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, There's a gas station. What happened on fire starter?
Oh, there's something missing on the list? I don't need. But I almost feel like one of the questions on the back was missing.
Because I already got 200. Okay, I have my max. I'm done. Like how much money I have. I have my max and $22.
All right, a couple more minutes.
Yeah. Wait, do I have to answer the questions on the back too? Right now?
We're just gonna discuss
I wonder if
it.
that's what they want.
Make your list and then we'll just discuss it.
I spent $195. This bad. I wish a multi-tube. How much is it? This bad. I still have a lot of them. Look how much I
Yeah. You have 8 items, you can take 8 things.
I know. 2 cents. I have 8 items.
You're picking what?
I need that buttload. I'm gonna get it.
Oh,
You're going on I got
You picked 8 items, so get going.
I told all of these.
All right, just a couple more minutes.
Oh yeah. Okay, I need to make my list.
All right, how many of you have your kits? You think you have your 8 items.
Well, we need one more thing.
Okay,
I'm done.
One more minute. One more minute.
Done.
What if we need them to
I was specially $210.
I know I didn't spend
All right. So let's look at this list and see what we think might be best. All right. How many of you chose a backpack with a blanket? How many of you thought that was going to be an important tool? Virtual kids. Anybody? Backpack with blanket, okay? I agree, that sounds like a really important item. Bug spray bottle. Anybody choose the bug spray?
You can just smack go.
Okay, it was a cheap little item you could add on. Handful of you, Lucas is just laughing about it. Yeah, all right. A fishing rod with 5 hooks.
Just grab
Okay.
it in water. Fish, you
No, all right. Fiona thinks she's going fishing. Flashlight with batteries. Okay, Kendall, Josie, almost all of you went with flashlight. A folding chair. Anybody go for that folding chair? Okay, good. Because I was going to worry about you guys if you made a folding chair a priority. Get your booty stirred. All right. One canteen.
Gotta have canteen for your water.
Zeke says we got to have that for our water. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Keep your fresh water in.
I got a gas burner because he has to disinfect his water. He has to put his water in.
One knife.
Oh yeah, machete. We got 2.
Knife. Oh, somebody got 2 knives. All right. Okay. All right. Josie, Fiona, shaking her head. Lucas, knife. Cam, light, knife. Good.
He has his hatchet.
He has his hatchet, but the hatchet wasn't a choice for you. So you have a knife. So that's going to be. I think that's going to be a critical item.
Use hatchets to hunt.
Yeah,
Or
you
like
don't.
skin deer. You do not use hatchets. No. Yeah, you.
I like to just give Lily like a look when people say things about the story that happened later. Have you read Lily Bryan's Winter?
Yes.
The one where like what would happen if?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, all right, knife. Good choice, guys. I'm really happy with the backpack blanket and the knife. Those would definitely be on my list here. I didn't make a list. Miss Babs is shopping right now. Okay, one lantern. Anybody need a lantern?
I accidentally put my hand up the
Okay.
flashlight.
Those of you that got a lantern, did you also get the flashlight?
No, I accidentally put my hand.
Okay, so a light and a flashlight.
You
A
don't need
lantern and a
two.
flashlight. I'm worried if we need both.
You don't need 2.
Actually,
Actually,
I'm
the flashlight runs on
If
battery.
we can have a
Which one could be more important?
Hey, Miss
Lantern.
Lantern, I have a-
Zeke has an idea, okay?
Okay, so you could technically like the plane. You know how like the gas station like there's lights that light up. You can get those light bulbs and connect it to the battery.
Okay.
What if he
Zeke thinks he can use the plane battery to power things, okay?
A
A log. Did anybody get a log?
You could just get one from the woods. You can
Yeah,
get
like
2 packs. Yeah, he has
Or we can buy a log.
Hang on, I'm not talking about Brian. This is your survival kit.
Yeah, that's you can just
Why
go
would you
buy
buy
one.
one
We got
log?
3 logs. We have these stored.
Right, one log. What is one log going to get you, okay? Just in case the batteries run out, all right? Okay?
Yeah.
One bag of marshmallows. Y'all cooking s'mores?
No.
No.
No. Okay.
I am. You need.
One pocket knife
Yes. Gotta have a Swiss
Pocket
Army
knife.
Swiss Army.
and the bigger knife, okay?
It's a machine.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Camping pots and pans.
Yes. No.
Okay, to cut up the fish. I like that, Kane. All right, good. Cam, Josie got the pots and pans. Fiona,
I did.
Ryan, Lily, good. Jason, good.
Camping pots and pans.
I agree. That's going on my
We
list.
got 2 regular.
Sleeping bag.
2.
2 sleeping bags for Grayson. Sophie's got one. Riley's got one.
I got one.
Cut the Deers' Kendall. All right, Cam and Kendall got a sleeping bag. All right, they're gonna stay nice and cozy. 1 mummy sleeping bag. So that was a regular sleeping bag, and then you got a mummy sleeping bag. Anybody get the more expensive sleeping bag? Josie went for the more expensive sleeping bag. Okay.
Expensive.
Josie, why did you pick the mummy sleeping bag instead of the regular one?
Because it's Canada. It's not. It's gonna be way too cold.
All right. Josie's hoping that the more expensive sleeping bag is going to keep her warmer. It just might. Hot dogs. Anybody? Hot dogs?
No.
We need to
No.
go.
We got 2
No.
guns.
Because guess what?
We got 2.
If you have that fishing hook and you have that campfire, you don't need to buy a hot dog.
Well, just in case we can't catch anything.
Okay. Some of you are buying hot dogs in case your fishing goes sideways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
S'mores kit.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you can use hot dog as
Me
bait.
because why? You got the big pots and.
You can use the horse kit.
Sweet.
Okay, that's your only food. Okay. All right.
I swear, somebody got
S'mores kit. Y'all were fired if you picked the s'mores kit.
Oh, okay.
Not important. No, I'm kidding. A gas burner.
Yes.
Gas burner.
Actually tells that sports kid. Sean actually
Good,
says.
good. I like that. 2-man tent,
Yeah. Me and Parker got it.
6-man tent, or 4-man tent. Can everybody get a tent?
6. 4.
Why would you doing a 4-man if it's
Everybody got it. Because it's a
Okay.
survival pack, not just for Ryan. It's like, it's for. I know. Me and Parker were thinking.
All right, I'm making my kit real quick. Hang on.
Wait a minute, I think I spent way too much. Yeah, you spent at $10.
He bought bug spray.
Yeah, I don't know about that bug spray. 50, 50, 100, 40, 165, 265. Ay, Miss Bab went over on my list.
Sam, I'm gonna give her a 20.
Boom, by $15. Okay.
I only spent
Have to kill the pocket knife, I guess. Oh, wow. All right, guys. Which item was there anything you wished was on this list that wasn't?
Yes, flares and a multi-tool.
Yes, a house.
All right. Maggie wanted a house. All right.
Inflatable raft.
Okay. I'm hearing some good ideas here in class. Hang on, and I'll come to virtual. I'm hearing inflatable raft from Sean. I think that's a good idea. Zeke said one of those multi-tools, so not just a pocket knife, but it's got like all kinds of tools on it. What else did you say, Zeke?
A Swiss Army knife. Well, that's a multi-tool and flares.
Okay, flares. Flares would be a good idea on the list. Parker, Grayson, what did you guys wish for?
And a tarp.
A tarp. Okay. Flint and steel, so that you could easily start a fire. Sam. A gun. Sam wanted a gun. Josie, what do you want?
A life straw.
Okay. All right.
They could be clean water.
All right. Good. Sophie.
I was gonna say, like, say you brought your dog with you, and like you wanted your dad to see your dog in the plane crash, you can use the dog.
All right. Maggie.
A house.
Maggie really wants to just put a house in her survival, like a little.
Use balloons.
Oh,
Okay.
with house and
Kaylin. Wi-Fi. She wants to bring her hotspot with her.
No. Why do you need that? Just play outside.
Macy. Macy said an extra set of clothes. I think that's pretty smart. All right. What?
Hammer and nails.
Hammer and nails, regular tools might be really good to have. Okay.
Miss Bab, I was there to phone. With unlimited data, because guess what? Wait, no. With a hotspot.
A blackout, bow and arrow.
Wait.
A new plane. All right. I like the bow and arrow, Kendall. That's a really great idea. Kane wants just a rifle. Like he's just gonna kill everything. All right. You're gonna take them all out. All right. Here we go. Let's find out what happened. All right, guys. Let me shut the door so it's easier to hear Sean.
Riley.
You're too loud. Okay, virtual kids. Chat is done. We are reading now. Okay? All right, chapter 3. Here we go. My page ripped. This is sad. Okay. Going to die, Brian thought. Going to die. Gonna die. Gonna die. His whole brain screamed it in the sudden silence. Gonna die. He wiped his mouth with the back of his arm and held the nose down. The plane went into a glide, a very fast glide, that 8 altitude. What does that mean, the 8 altitude? Zeke, what do you think that means?
It went down really fast and it took all the altitude.
It went down really fast. So he's going down really at a steep angle. He's not kind of like gliding nicely. He's going down. Okay? Suddenly there weren't any lakes. Uh-oh. All he'd seen since they started flying over the forest was lakes, and now they were gone. Out in front, far away at the horizon, he could see lots of them. Off to the right and left, more of them, glittering blue in the late afternoon sun. But he needed one right in front. He desperately needed a lake right in front of the plane, and all he saw through the windshield were trees, green death trees. If he had to turn, he didn't think he could keep the plane flying. His stomach tightened into a series of rolling knots, and his breath came in short bursts. There, not quite in front, but slightly to the right, he saw a lake, L-shaped with rounded corners, and the plane was nearly aimed at the long part of the L, coming from the bottom and heading to the top, just a tiny bit to the right. He pushed the right rudder pedal gently, and the nose moved over. But the turn cost him speed, and now the lake was above the nose. He pulled back on the wheel slightly, and the nose came up. This caused the plane to slow dramatically and almost seemed to stop and wallow in the air. The controls became very loose-feeling and frightened Brian, making him push the wheel back in. This increased the speed a bit, but filled the windshield once more with nothing but trees and put the lake well above the nose and out of reach. For a space of 3 to 4 seconds, things seemed to hang, almost stop. The plane was flying, but so slowly, it would never reach the lake. Brian looked out to the side and saw a small pond, and at the edge of the pond some large animal, he thought a moose, standing out in the water. All so still looking, so stopped, the pond and the moose and the trees, as he slid over them now, only 300 or 400 feet off the ground, all like a picture. Then everything happened at once. Trees suddenly took on detail, filled his whole field of vision with green, and he knew he would hit and die. But his luck held, and just as he was to hit, he came into an open lane, a channel of fallen trees, a wide place leading to the lake. The plane, committed now to landing, to crashing, fell into the wide place like a stone, and Brian eased back on the wheel and braced himself for the crash. But there was a tiny bit of speed left, and when he pulled up on the wheel, the nose came up, and he saw in front the blue of the lake, and at that instant the plane hit the trees. There was a great wrenching as the wings caught the pines at the side of the clearing and broke back, ripping back just outside the main braces. Dust and dirt blew off the floor into his face so hard he thought there must have been some kind of explosion. He was momentarily blinded and slammed forward in the seat, smashing his head on the wheel. Then a wild crashing sound, ripping of metal, and the plane rolled to the right and blew through the trees, out over the water and down, down to slam into the lake. Skipped once on water as hard as concrete, water that tore the windshield out and shattered the side windows, water that drove him back into the seat. Somebody was screaming, screaming as the plane drove down into the water. Someone screamed tight animal screams of fear and pain, and he did not know that it was his sound, that he roared against the water that took him and the plane still deeper down in the water. He saw nothing but since blue, cold blue-green, and he raked at the seatbelt catch, tore his nails loose on one hand. He ripped at it until it released, and somehow, the water trying to kill him, to end him, somehow he pulled himself out of the shattered front window and clawed up into the blue, felt something hold him back, felt his windbreaker tear, and he was free. Tearing free, ripping free. But so far to the surface, and his lungs could not do this thing, could not hold, and were through. And he sucked water, took a great pull of water that would finally win, finally take him. And his head broke into light, and he vomited and swam, pulling without knowing what he was doing, without knowing anything. Pulling until his hands caught at weeds and mud, pulling and screaming until his hands caught at last in grass and brush, and he felt his chest on land, felt his face in the coarse blades of grass, and he stopped. Everything stopped. A color came that he had never seen before, a color that exploded in his mind with the pain, and he was gone from it all, spiraling out into the world, spiraling out into nothing. Nothing.
We're
We're going to read chapter 4.
Yay! Thank you.
Okay? All right. The memory was like a knife cutting into him, slicing deep into him with hate. The secret. He had been riding his 10-speed with a friend named Terry. They had been taking a run on a bike trail and decided to come back a different way, a way that took them past the Amber Mall. Ryan remembered everything in incredible detail. Remembered the time on the bank clock in the mall flashing 3:31. Then the temperature 82 and the date. All the numbers were part of the memory. All of his life was part of the memory. Terry had just turned to smile at him about something, and Brian looked over Terry's head and saw her, his mother. She was sitting in a station wagon, a strange wagon. He saw her, and she did not see him. Brian was going to wave or call out, but something stopped him. There was a man in the car. Short blonde hair the man had, wearing some kind of white pullover tennis shirt. Brian saw this and more, saw the secret, and saw more later. But the memory came in pieces, came in scenes like this. Terry smiling, Brian looking over his head to see the station wagon and his mother sitting with the man, the time and temperature clock, the front wheel of his bike, the short blonde hair of the man, the white shirt of the man. The hot hate slices of the memory were exact. The secret. All right. So all of you that were predicting Mama was with another man,
Uh-oh.
seems to be the case. All right. Brian opened his eyes and screamed. For seconds, he did not know where he was, only that the crash was still happening, and he was going to die. And he screamed until his breath was gone. Then silence, filled with sobs as he pulled in air, half crying. How could it be so quiet? Moments ago, there was nothing but noise, crashing and tearing, screaming. Now quiet. Some birds were singing. How could birds be singing? Zeke. Zeke just realized something. He says, how's he going to get the survival pack if the plane's at the bottom of the lake? Maybe what, Mace?
Maybe
He's going to ask somebody to help him? All right, let's see if there's anybody around. We'll find out if there's anybody around.
maybe there's stuff that can float and then it would float it up.
Maybe it had some sort of floating thing and it would float up. Okay, we can hope.
Yeah, but it's in the plane. The plane has
There could be stores.
There could be stores. Let's hope he crashed near a store.
Wait, said something.
Wait, but how did he get out?
Hank said something.
If he left the plane, there's obviously
What happened to the plane that allowed Brian to get out of it so easily?
The windshield.
The windshield and the windows broke out.
So the
Kane, what? Hang on.
A store. No, I'm just telling you now. That's.
All right, Kane, don't laugh. All right.
this bad.
All right. Here we go.
If he got out, the safety survival kit could also get out through the way he got out.
Okay. His legs felt wet, and he raised up on his hands and looked back down at them. They were in the lake. Strange. They went down into the water. He tried to move, but pain hammered him and made his breath shorten into gasps, and he stopped. His legs still in the water. Pain, memory. He turned again, and sun came across the water. Late sun, I just lost my place, cut into his eyes and made him turn away. It was over then, the crash. He was alive. The crash is over, and I'm alive, he thought. Then he had his eyes closed, and he lowered his head for minutes that seemed longer. When he opened them again, it was evening, and some of the sharp pain had abated. There were many dull aches, and the crash came back to him fully. Into the trees and out onto the lake. The plane had crashed and sunk in the lake, and he had somehow pulled free. He raised himself and crawled out of the water, grunting with the pain of movement. His legs were on fire, and his forehead felt as if somebody had been pounding on it with a hammer. But he could move. He pulled his legs out of the lake and crawled on his hands and knees until he was away from the wet, soft shore and near a small stand of brush of some kind. Then he went down, only this time to rest, to save something of himself. He lay on his side and put his head on his arm and closed his eyes, because that was all he could do now, all he could think of being able to do. He closed his eyes and slept, dreamless, deep and down. Do what, Z?
You just don't remember the night.
Right. Okay. All right. There was almost no light when he opened his eyes again. The darkness of night was thick, and for a moment he began to panic again. To see, he thought, to see is everything, and he could not see. But he turned his head without moving his body and saw that across the lake the sky was a light gray, that the sun was starting to come up, and he remembered that it had been evening when he went to sleep. Must be morning now, he mumbled it almost in a hoarse whisper. As the thickness of sleep left him, the world came back. He was still in pain, all over pain. His legs were cramped and drawn up, tight and aching, and his back hurt when he tried to move. Worst was a keening throb in his head that pulsed with every beat of his heart. It seemed that the whole crash had happened to his head. He rolled on his back and felt his sides and his legs, moving things slowly. He rubbed his arms. Nothing seemed to be shattered or even sprained all that badly. When he was 9, he had plowed his small dirt bike into a parked car and broken his ankle, had to wear a cast for 8 weeks. And there was nothing now like that, nothing broken, just battered around a bit. How lucky is he that his plane just crashed and he doesn't have any broken bones at all?
Broke a bone with the bike.
Back in the day, yeah. All right.
What year is this?
20.
Book had to be written, I think, when? Original copyright in 87? Late 80s? All right. His forehead felt massively swollen to the touch, almost like a mound out over his eyes, and it was so tender that when his fingers grazed it, he nearly cried. But there was nothing he could do about it, and like the rest of him, it seemed to be bruised more than broken. I feel like I would want ibuprofen or something in my survival kit now that I'm reading this. Probably, yeah. I'm alive, he thought. I'm alive. It could have been different. There could have been death. I could be done. Like the pilot, he thought suddenly. The pilot in the plane, down in the water, down in the blue water, strapped in the seat. Well, he's definitely dead now. He sat up, or tried to. The first time he fell back. But on the second attempt, grunting with the effort, he managed to come to a sitting position and scrunch sideways until his back was against a small tree where he sat facing the lake, watching the sky get lighter and lighter with the coming dawn. His clothes were wet and clammy, and there was a faint chill. He pulled the torn remnants of his windbreaker, pieces really, around his shoulders and tried to hold what heat his body could find. He could not think, could not make thought patterns work right. Things seemed to go back and forth between reality and imagination, except that it was all reality. 1 second he seemed to only have imagined that there was a plane crash. that he had fought out of the sinking plane and swum to shore, that it had all happened to some other person or in a movie playing in his mind. Then he would feel his clothes wet and cold, and his forehead would slash a pain through his thoughts, and he would know it was real. It had really happened, but all in a haze world. So he sat and stared at the lake, felt the pain come and go in waves, and watched the sun come over the end of the lake. Yeah, Sophie. Is there a movie?
No.
Yeah, but it's cruddy compared to the book. We'll probably watch it, but it leaves out like half the book. It's not really great.
It's not a book if it.
Yeah, you will love this book. The movie is a disappointment in comparison. But I have it. It's in the cabinet. So, yeah, Riley.
Do they leave out the plane for the movie?
It doesn't go into this kind of detail. Riley asked if the plane crashes in the movie. It's kind of like you see the plane going down, and then it like skips to when he's like crawling out of the water, I think. I don't remember. We watched it last year, and I was like, this is terrible. But last year was the first time I'd seen the movie. Okay, anyway, here we go. It took an hour, perhaps two. He could not measure time yet and didn't care for the sun to get halfway up. With it came some warmth, small bits of it at first, and with the heat came clouds of insects. Thick, swarming hordes of mosquitoes that flocked to his body made a living coat on his exposed skin. Clogged his nostrils when he inhaled, poured into his mouth when he opened it to take a breath. It was not possibly believable, not this. He had come through the crash, but the insects were not possible. He coughed them up, spat them out, sneezed them out, closed his eyes and kept brushing his face, slapping and crushing them by the dozens, by the hundreds. But as soon as he cleared a place, as soon as he killed them, more came. Thick, whining, buzzing masses of them. Mosquitoes and some small black flies he'd never seen before, all biting, chewing, taking from him.
Okay. I think
So that bug spray seems like a really good idea now.
Yeah, I said the bug
Kudos to everybody that got the bug spray. Okay? In moments, his eyes were swollen shut and his face puffy and round to match his battered forehead. He pulled the torn pieces of his windbreaker over his head and tried to shelter in it, but the jacket was full of rips and it didn't work. In desperation, he pulled his t-shirt up to cover his face, but that exposed the skin of his lower back, and the mosquitoes and flies attacked the new soft flesh of his back so viciously that he pulled the shirt back down. In the end, he sat with the windbreaker pulled up, brushed with his hands, and took it, almost crying in frustration and agony. There was nothing left to do. And when the sun was finally up and heating him directly, bringing steam off of his wet clothes and bathing him with warmth, the mosquitoes and flies disappeared, almost that suddenly. 1 minute he was sitting in the middle of a swarm, the next they were gone and the sun was on him. Vampires, he thought. Apparently they didn't like the deep of night, perhaps because it was too cool and they couldn't take the direct sunlight. But in that gray time in the morning when it began to get warm and before the sun was full up and hot, he couldn't believe them. Never in all the reading and the movies he had watched on television about the outdoors, never once had they mentioned the mosquitoes or flies. All they showed on the naturalist shows was beautiful scenery or animals jumping around having a good time. Nobody ever mentioned the mosquitoes and the flies.
That's just nothing.
He pulled himself up to stand against the tree and stretched, bringing new aches and pains. His back muscles must have been hurt as well. They almost seemed to tear when he stretched. And while the pain in his forehead seemed to be abating somewhat, just trying to stand made him weak enough to nearly collapse. Abated. It says the pain in his forehead seemed to be abating somewhat. What does that mean?
Is that a vocabulary?
Josie, what do you think?
I don't really know, but I mean, if I have to guess, it might be like spreading.
The pain in his forehead seemed to be spreading somewhat. Okay, that's a good guess. Sean, what do you think?
Like not agreeing with his brain?
Not what?
Like the body's not agreeing with him?
Okay, so like his body's not agreeing with him. Zeke, what do you think?
It's like growing in pain and I feel like it's like growing.
All right, Zeke says he thinks it means growing. I'm about to burst y'all's bubbles.
Yeah.
Is it
Lily, what does it mean? Starting to go away. It's dying down.
Yeah, that's
The
what I
pain is
heard.
abating, it's subsiding, it's going away. Dying down a little bit. It's getting better.
So it's
Okay.
like
It's giving me pain just thinking about it.
I can't imagine how bad you would hurt after this. Like the amount of aches and pains that you would have. Like your body would be so sore.
He probably has he probably has a disease or something if he got bit by that.
All right, Zeke's worried he's going to have diseases after all of these bites now.
Rabies.
I mean, fair concern. All right. The backs of his hands were puffy, and his eyes were almost swollen shut from the mosquitoes, and he saw everything through a narrow squint. Not that there was much to see, he thought, scratching the bites. In front of him lay the lake, blue and deep. He had a sudden picture of the plane sunk in the lake, down and down in the blue, with the pilot's body still strapped in the seat, his hair waving in the water.
That's weird. Wow.
Great. He shook his head. More pain. That wasn't something to think about. He looked at his surroundings again. The lake stretched out slightly below him. He was at the base of the L, looking up at the long part with the short part out to his right. In the morning light, the calm of the water was absolutely perfectly still. He could see the reflections of the trees at the other end of the lake. Upside down in the water, they seemed almost like another forest, an upside-down forest to match the real one. As he watched, a large bird, he thought it looked like a crow, but it seemed larger, flew from the top real forest, and the reflection bird matched it, both flying out over the water. Everything was green, so green it went into him. The forest was largely made up of pines and spruce, with strands of some low brush smeared here and there, and thick grass and some other kind of very small brush all over it. He couldn't identify most of it, except the evergreens, and some leafy trees as he thought might be aspen. He'd seen pictures of aspens in the mountains on television. The country around the lake was moderately hilly, but the hills were small, almost hummocks, and there were very few rocks except to his left. There lay a rocky ridge that stuck out overlooking the lake, about 20 feet high. If the plane had come down a little to the left, it would have hit the rocks and never made the lake. He would have been smashed, destroyed. The word came. I would have been destroyed and torn and smashed, driven into the rocks and destroyed. Luck, he thought. I have luck. I had good luck there. But he knew that was wrong. If he had had good luck, his parents wouldn't have divorced because of the secret, and he wouldn't be flying with a pilot who had a heart attack, and he wouldn't be here where he had to have good luck to keep from being destroyed. If you keep walking back from good luck, he thought, you'll come to bad luck. He shook his head again, wincing. Another thing not to think about. The rocky ridge was rounded and seemed to be of some kind of sandstone with bits of darker stone layered and stuck into it. Directly across the lake from it, at the inside corner of the L, was a mound of sticks and mud rising up out of the water a good 8 or 10 feet. At first, Brian couldn't place it, but he knew somehow what it was, had seen it in films. Then a small brown head popped to the surface of the water near the mound and began swimming off down the short leg of the L, leaving a V of ripples behind, and he remembered where he'd seen it. It was a beaver house, called a beaver lodge in a special he'd seen on the public channel. A fish jumped, not a large fish, but it made a big splash near the beaver, and as if by a signal there were suddenly little splops all over the sides of the lake along the shore as fish began jumping, hundreds of them jumping and slapping the water. Brian watched them for a time, still in the half daze, still not thinking very well. The scenery was very pretty, he thought, and there were new things to look at. But it was all green and blue blur, and he was used to the gray and black of the city, the sounds of the city, traffic, people talking, sounds all the time, the hum and the whine of the city. Here at first it was silent, or he thought it was silent, but when he really started to really listen, he heard thousands of things, hisses and blurts, small sounds, birds singing, hum of insects, splashes from the fish jumping. There was great noise here, but a noise he did not know, and the colors were new to him. And the colors and noise mixed in his mind to make a blue-green blur that he could hear a hissing pulse sound, and he was tired, so awfully tired, and standing had taken a lot of energy somehow, had drained him. He supposed he was still in some kind of shock from the crash, and there was still the pain, the dizziness, the strange feeling. He found another tree, a tall pine with no branches until the top, and sat with his back against it, looking down on the lake with the sun warming him. And in a few moments, he scrunched down and was asleep again. All right.
Good.
We're going to do the few questions together again. So, virtual friends, you won't have anything to fill out. I'm not even passing the worksheet out to you guys today. Okay?
Yay.
Where was Brian finally able to land the plane?
In the water.
L-shaped lake.
In the L-shaped lake. What did Brian have to do to make it out of the crashed airplane alive? Think carefully, because I actually gave you a lot of detail here on him getting out of the plane.
He had to take his seatbelt off and go through the.
He
had to take his windbreaker off, but before that, Fiona, what was something else he had to do?
He had to get out of the water. I think what he did was when the windows broke, he crawled out of the plane.
He did crawl out of the windows, but before he crawled out of the windows and before his windbreaker tore, what else happened? Kendall Cole, what else?
First, he was strapped to his seatbelt and he had to get out of it. Then he had to crawl out of the airplane and swim to his safety.
Yep. Okay, good. When he was trying to get out of the seatbelt, what happened? This was a gross detail.
He ripped his fingernail.
He ripped his fingernails off. He was like clawing at it in a hurry. Such a hurry that it like ripped his fingernails off.
It's so
But in the grand scheme of things, drown in the water strapped to the plane or rip your fingernails off, I'm going to sacrifice my fingernails every time, guys. Like, it's going to be painful, but not as painful as I think drowning would probably be. That'd be awful.
Oh yeah, not being able to
Okay. All right. So what was the secret? Now we know the secret. What is the secret, Maggie?
His mom is with his mom is with different guys.
Mama's with a different guy. What a turkey. What kind of mama?
Kitty.
All right. What attacked Brian as he was watching the sunrise?
Oh, mosquitoes.
And mosquitoes and black flies, some black type of flies. He said, okay. How did Brian finally escape the mosquitoes and the black flies? Right. The sun came out and made them go away. How does the forest compare to the city life that Brian is used to?
Not as many bugs.
Not as many bugs, all right. Not used to that. Sophie, what else? Be what?
It was way quieter.
Way quieter than the city. At first he thought it was way quieter than the city. Maggie, then what?
He actually started to listen, and he heard animals, and the difference is that more peaceful. It's kind of more peaceful. You actually see trees instead of buildings.
Okay.
You can actually see the sun instead of seeing city lights.
All right. So what Maggie said was, after he started to really listen, he heard that there was plenty of sound, animal sounds and nature sounds. But instead of looking around and just seeing buildings everywhere, it's just trees, 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 and more trees and water and sky. Z.
He said it was like bluish. It was just like blue and green out there in the city of.
Yeah. He said looking around just seemed like a blue-gray blur, but in the city it was a gray-black blur. Okay? All right. We're going to stop here for reading for today. If you guys have a little bit of break, we'll be back for math in like 5-6 minutes or so. So you guys are good to go. You don't have anything to turn in today. You can just hit OK on today's stuff since we did the questions together. All right. And we're going to get cleaned up and reset for math. Yes, Josie.
So I wanted to know if the Mr. Marshall thing, I watched the video already, but